Greetings and welcome back to room 303 and AP English, and we now turn to book 16 of the Iliad, Patroclus Fights and Dies. Now, we have been anticipating this book for a while in our comments, as you can tell. Here, finally, we will have Patroclus's Aristeia, that is to say that scene of important fighting battle, right? He will be fighting on behalf of the Greeks and, of course, Achilles. We'll also, of course, recognize this as maybe Hector's darkest hour. There are some readers of this poem who say that this is the most tragic of all the books, because everything that happens here has been kind of forecasted from earlier books, and now it inevitably happens, and then everybody, it's the beginning of the end. Everybody begins to struggle, and we have the end. Let's do a quick summary, as we have done in the past, of our earlier lectures. Again, if you haven't been following our lectures, hit learnstrong.net and find the AP folder and find these lectures. Let's do a real quick review of where we've been thus far. In book 1, of course, the invocation of the Muse. Agamemnon and Achilles fall out, which is why by book 16 we are where we are, with still Achilles so mad that he will not rejoin the war, and he'll let his friend go and die. Now there's going to be some irony involved in that. We'll talk about it. In book 2, Agamemnon's bad dream from Zeus is that the Greeks will win, and and then all kinds of terrible things happen to the Greek soldiers. The catalog of the ships, and of course the chariots as well. In book 3, we have Paris versus Menelaus, and it looks like the war is over when Menelaus has jacked Paris. By book 4, though, Hera says to Zeus, "No, I need the city of Troy to fall," and she will then convince Pandarus the Trojan to shoot an arrow at Menelaus, and then war is on again. In book 5, we have Diomedes' Aristeia, right? That type scene, as we already talked about it, where he actually wounds Aphrodite and Ares. In book 6, and again, this is an important one. It seems like an eternity ago that we were 10 books away in book 6. Now we're at book 16. But in book 6, we've got Hector in Troy with Andromache and Astyanax, his son, his wife, and his son. And of course, that's a pivotal moment for us in so many ways, right? In book 7, we have Ajax versus Hector, and the truce that's established because neither can beat the other. In book 8, we have Zeus and his famous scales, determining that, in fact, for a while anyway, the Greeks will have to suffer the ascension of the Trojans, and especially Hector, right? In book 9, because the Trojans are, in fact, defeating now the Greeks in horrific ways, Agamemnon, agreeing with Nestor, sends his embassy to Achilles of Odysseus and Phrynox and Ajax, and Achilles will say no. I paused at the conclusion of book 9, because book 6, book 9 are the two really important books. I paused at the end of book 9, and I did a review, and I call that lecture Achilles' Crisis of Faith, where I argue that in Achilles rejecting the warrior code of Time, Scooby Snacks, honor, and Kleos, the glory that's associated with being remembered after you die, he seems to reject both of those. Achilles is then kind of hanging out in the wind in some ways. He doesn't really have much to believe in anymore. In book 10, Diomedes and Odysseus will have their night raid. They jack Dolan, of course, and grab some ponies. In book 11, Agamemnon's Aristeia. He will, of course, have his day in the sun, leading Achilles to send Patroclus to ask Nestor what's going on. And of course, Nestor will then say to Patroclus, it's a pivotal moment in book 11, because it takes us to book 16, right? The suggestion will then be made by Nestor, Patroclus, either you convince Achilles to get back into the war, or you put on Achilles' armor and stand in his stead, and the Greeks will then find renewed rejuvenation, and the Trojans will, of course, be freaked out. Book 12, as we've said, book 11 through book 15 is an important series of that, the longest day, culminating, of course, with book 16, as we're about to see. In book 12, we've got the Trojans at the ramparts, the trench, the wall, and, of course, Hector's famous boulder. In book 13, we have Poseidon as Calchas, who is encouraging the Greeks, and Hector taunting Paris. And, of course, we have at the end of that book, Hector's famous scream, right? In book 14, well, that's a pivotal book for us, with Hera seducing Zeus so that Ajax can jack Hector with the big boulder in his chest. And then in book 15, the one that we just finished, Zeus wakes up, is really upset at Hera, and then, of course, Poseidon tells Poseidon he has to stop, sends Apollo to heal Hector, and now the Trojans are on the ascendancy. We now turn to book 16. Let's do a very quick kind of review. Patroclus will meet Achilles in tears. So we've got this sense from when we saw that in, you know, early on in that book 11 motif, right? That okay, Nestor is going to say to Patroclus, why don't you convince Achilles and then put on armor if you need to? And then we got all this stuff that happened in between. But it takes a lot of time to read it and to discuss this stuff. But in an actual time, that's just been a really quick moment, right? And all of a sudden, Patroclus shows up. Achilles will ask him, dude, why are you crying like a little girl? It's an interesting simile. And Patroclus will say, don't make fun of me and my pain. These men are all dying. And it's because you refuse to come in. Let me take your armor. Achilles gives his command and says, don't go to Troy. Okay? You know, you can do this thing and scare the Trojans away from our ships, but don't go to Troy. We then will have Patroclus' Aristeia beginning at line 155, puts on his armor and the whole deal. Achilles will challenge his Myrmidons, those men, right, who he brought with him to fight well. And obviously there's irony here, right? In other words, he's telling them to do what he himself won't do. He goes back to his tent, he fills up his cup, he prays to Zeus. He asks Zeus for two things for Patroclus, courage and bring him home. And we're told, the poet tells us, Zeus only answers one of those requests. We have an amazing simile, the swarm simile as it's sometimes referred to, about wasps in line 305 that we'll look at. And then Patroclus kills a lot of people. He stops the fires at the ships of there, but he does not obey Achilles. Instead, he disobeys and he heads towards Troy. He kills Zeus's son Sarpedon. We want to put this in our notes and we're going to come back to it. The death of Sarpedon is a pivotal moment because in many ways, scholars have called it, it prefigures in many ways all of the deaths to follow. Of course, Patroclus is soon to happen, and of course Hector's after that, and by extension Achilles, and then of course the city of Troy, right? Zeus wants to save his son Sarpedon, and it will be Hera who says, you can't do it. No. And we're told that Zeus will rain tears of blood at line 545. And maybe this is the only time in the Iliad that we see this level of emotion from Zeus, right? There is a fight that takes place over Sarpedon's body when he is killed. Of course, a little bit later, Apollo will save the body of Sarpedon and take him off to Lycia. You have Glaucus, who will hear from Sarpedon right as he dies, take care of my body. Glaucus will go to Hector and say as much. We've got to fight to recover the body and the armor of Sarpedon. Patroclus then almost takes Troy, and in fact, if it wasn't for Apollo on the fourth attempt, Apollo says to Patroclus, no, you cannot climb the walls of Troy and subdue the city. That doesn't even fall to Achilles. Patroclus backs off. Apollo then goes to Hector, disguised as Hector's uncle, and he says, Asius, and he says, do your duty, get out there and go jack some Greeks. Then we have Patroclus and Hector. Before he fights with Hector, however, he kills Hector's driver, Sabrinos, and they then will fight over the corpse. Patroclus will kill 9 more men, and then finally Apollo will jack Patroclus. It's significant the way Patroclus gets jacked. First Apollo, from behind, knocks off the helmet, knocks off the breastplate of Achilles. He's vulnerable and somewhat knocked out, stunned. Euphorbius then is going to wound him in the back by stabbing him between the shoulder blades, and then he runs away, leaving finally Hector to stab him through the lower bowels in the front. Spear comes out the back, and it will be at that moment that Hector begins to taunt Patroclus, and Patroclus then will have a special prophecy for Hector, and he will tell him, I'm dead, but soon it will be you. Hector tries to steal Achilles' immortal horses, and that's how the book will end. All right, well, let's turn now to the actual text. And I've said this before, I love to read this all with you. I just don't have the time. So let's go to it right away. We're at the opening lines. So they fought to the death around that beaked ship, as Patroclus reached Achilles, his great commander, and wept warm tears like a dark spring running down some desolate rock face. It's an amazing simile. Its shaded currents flowing. And the brilliant runner Achilles saw him coming, filled with pity, and spoke out winging words. Why in tears, Patroclus? Like a girl, a baby, running after her mother, begging to be picked up, and she tugs her skirts, holding her back as she tries to hurry off, all tears, fawning up at her, till she takes her in her arms. It's an interesting word picture on a number of counts. That's how you look, Patroclus, streaming like tears. But why? Some news from the Myrmidons, news for me. Some message from Phthia that you alone have heard. They tell me Menoetius, Actor's son, is still alive, and Peleus, Achilles' son, lives on among his Myrmidons. In other words, he says, you and I are dead, and our fathers aren't dead. So, if both our fathers have died, we'd have some cause for grief, or weeping over the Argives, are you? Seeing them die against the hollow ships, repaid for their offenses. Out with it now, don't harbor it deep inside you. We must share it all. And then, with a wrenching groan. Interesting construction again. We've seen this in the Iliad several times. I'm just pointing it out to you on line 23. You answered your friend Patroclus, O my writer. Achilles, son of Peleus, greatest of the Achaeans, spare me your anger, please. Such heavy blows have overwhelmed the troops. And then he goes on to say it. But you, at line 33, you're intractable, Achilles. Pray God such anger never seizes me, such rage you nurse. Again, we're back to the word rage, the opening line of the poem. Cursed in your own courage. It's a fascinating line. Cursed in your own courage. We know that, in fact, this reticence to enter the war will lead to Patroclus, and then, of course, Patroclus' death. What good will a man, even one in the next generation, get from you unless you defend the Argives from disaster? You, heart of iron. He was not your father, the horseman Peleus. Thetis was not your mother. Never. The salt gray, sunless ocean gave you birth, and the towering blank rocks. Your temper is so reckless. But still, if down deep some prophecy makes you balk, some doom your noble mother revealed to you from Zeus, well and good. He's echoing exactly the lines of Nestor from Book 11, line 948, right? And following. In other words, you must be afraid. It's an interesting kind of reverse psychology. You must be afraid of dying, and that's something your mother said to you about coming to Troy and dying. At least, he says it this way, send me into the battle. By the way, technically, just to point out, Patroclus never actually asks Achilles, will you please return? He just kind of infers, you must be afraid. But then he says it, at least send me into the battle quickly. Let the whole Myrmidon army follow my command. I might bring some light of victory to our Argives, and give me your own fine armor to buckle on my back, so the Trojans might take me for you, Achilles. Yes, hold off from attack, and Achaea's fighting sons get second wind, exhausted as they are. Breathing room in war is all too brief. We're fresh, unbroken. The enemy's battle-weary. We could roll those broken Trojans back to Troy, clear of the ships and shelters. So he pleaded, and then the line is, lost in his own innocence. It's one of those brilliant lines. I'm trying to argue for you and to you that the Iliad is this amazing poem with these little throwaway lines. So Patroclus pleaded, lost in his own great innocence, condemned to beg for his own death and brutal doom. And moved now to his depths, the famous runner Achilles cried, no, no, my prince Patroclus, what are you saying? Prophecies? None that touch me. This thing stung him a little bit about his mother. You must be scared to fight. None I know of. No do my noble mother reveal to me from Zeus. Just this terrible pain that wounds me to the quick. When one man attempts to plunder a man his equal. We're back to it again. He can't let it go, the fact he lost his teammate. To commandeer a prize, exulting so in his own power. Go back to my lecture on books 1 through 9, Achilles' crisis of fate. That's the pain that wounds me, suffering such humiliation. That girl, the sons of Achaea picked her as my prize, and I sacked the walled city, won her with my spear, but right from my grasp he tears her, mighty Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, treating me like some vagabond, some outcast, stripped of all my rights. Enough. And then he says it, let bygones be bygones now, done is done. How on earth can a man rage on forever? Still by God, I said, I would not relax my anger, not till the cries and carnage reached my own ships. The ironies will be, here in a second, they will reach his own ships, and yet Achilles still won't fight. He will send Patroclus into the war. He himself won't fight. Well, the command is then given. Even so, Patroclus, he says at line 91, fight disaster off the ships, fling yourself at the Trojans full force before they get our hulls with leaping fire and tear away the beloved day of our return. But take this command to heart, obey it to the end, so you can win great honor, great glory for me in the eyes of all the Argive ranks. And they'll send her back, my lithe and lovely girl, and top it off with troves of glittering gifts. Of course, the irony will be that they will, in fact, offer all these gifts, but it won't matter to Achilles at that moment because his pal Patroclus will be gone. Once you have whipped the army from the fleet, you must come back. This is the agreement, Patroclus. Even if Zeus, the thundering lord of Hera, lets you seize your glory, You must not burn for war against these Trojans, madmen lusting for battle, not without me. You will only make my glory that much less. Now, a lot has been made of these lines that Achilles is actually saying, I want you to go out, I want you to win me glory, but the most important thing that you got to do is make sure you don't get too much glory. In other words, don't go all the way to Troy. That's one reading. The other reading is that Achilles knows that Patroclus is not a good enough warrior to fight against Hector and win. Right? You must not, lost in the flesh and fire of triumph, slaughtering Trojans outright, drive your troops to Troy. What if one of the gods is predicting what's going to happen? Apollo, obviously. What if one of the gods who never die comes down from Olympus heights to intervene in battle? The deadly archer, he's talking about Apollo, loves his Trojans dearly. No, you must turn back. Soon as you bring the light of victory to the ships, let the rest of them cut themselves to pieces on the plain. Oh, would to God, Father Zeus, Athena, and Lord Apollo, not one of all these Trojans could flee his death. Not one, no Argive either. But we could stride from the slaughter, so we could bring Troy's hollowed crown of towers toppling down around us, you and I. And then, fascinatingly, the last word of this speech, alone. These are the last words that Achilles will speak to Patroclus, minus a few other lines here to follow. And notice the last word that he says is, I wish you and I could take Troy all by ourselves. I wish all of the Trojans and all of the Greeks could just kill each other off, and you and I could take it alone. Fascinating. Well, the ships are in fact burning, and the last words are spoken now at line 150 or so. And the ships were going up in flames at once, engulfed them in quenchless fire. In a flash, the blaze went swirling round the stern, and Achilles slapped his thighs, a common motif, and urged Patroclus, last words now to Patroclus, to arms. Notice, it's fascinating. He said, I'm going to come back the moment our ships are burning. My ships are burning, and they are. And he still doesn't go. To arms, Patroclus, prince and master horseman. I can see the blaze go roaring at the ships. They must not destroy them. No escape route then. Quick, strap on my gear. I'll rouse the troops. And then the next line from the poet. That was all. That was all. And Patroclus armed himself in Achilles' gleaming bronze. Patroclus' Aristeia. I wish I had time to read it. I don't. He dresses in Achilles' armor, but not his spear. We're told the great Achilles' only weapon, Patroclus did not take, at line 165, 66, 67, was the great man's spear, weighted, heavy, tough. No other Achaean fighter could heft that shaft. Only Achilles had the skill to wield it well. Pelian ash it was, a gift to his father Peleus, presented by Charon once, hewn on Pelian's crest, to be the death of heroes. Then we get the war team, 3 ponies, 2 of them the immortal ponies. We're going to have more to say about that in book 17. Then we have Achilles speaking to the Myrmidons, and he will say to them, we find out, by the way, that a large number of these Myrmidons, 50 fast black ships with 50 troops, fighters in each of them, right? So 2,500 troops are just for Achilles here. And we're told at line 233 or so, as soon as Achilles mustered all battalions, positioned in battle order, led by captains, he imposed his stern command on all his troops. Before this, by the way, we have a listing of all of the different men who lead these different troops. Myrmidons, he says, not one of you dare forget those threats you hurled from the fast-trimmed ships against the Trojans. All the while I raged, and I was the one you blamed, down to the last fighter. Achilles gets a little personal here, right? Brutal son of Peleus, your mother nursed you on Gaul, merciless Iron Man, confining your own men to the ships against their will. So, home we go in these ships and cut the seas again, since now such deadly anger strikes our captain, end quote. Denouncing me, he says, my comrades clustered together, always grumbling. Well, here's a tremendous work of battle, look, blazing before your eyes, and just the sort you longed for all those days. So each man tense with courage, fight the Trojans down. And in fact, that's exactly what happens. He goes back to his tent, he gets out his cup, he pours libations to Zeus, and he says his prayer at line 280. If you honored me, to Zeus he says, if you honored me last time and heard my prayer and rained destruction down on all Achaea's ranks, now, once more, I beg you, bring my prayer to pass. I myself hold out on shore with the beach ships here, but I send my comrade forth to war with troops of Myrmidons. Launch glory along with him, high Lord of Thunder Zeus. Fill his heart with courage, 2-part prayer. Fill his heart with courage so even Hector learns that Patroclus has the skill to fight his wars alone, my friend in arms. Or his hands can rage, unvanquished, only when I go wading in and face the grind of battle. But once he repels the roaring onslaught from the ships, let him come back to me and our fast fleet, unharmed, with all my armor round him. all our comrades fighting round my friend. So Achilles prayed, we're told. And Zeus in all his wisdom heard those prayers. One prayer the father granted, the other he denied. Patroclus would drive the onslaught off the ships, but that much Zeus granted true. But denied him safe and sound return from battle. Once Achilles had poured the wine and prayed to Zeus, he returned to his shelter, stowed the cup in the chest, then took his stand outside, his spirit yearning still to watch Achaeans and Trojans struggle to the death. So we're told, and the prayer happens. We then will meet an amazing simile. This comparison of epic similes, these epic similes are remarkable. At line 305 or so, they swarmed the Greeks like wasps from a roadside nest when boys have made it their sport to set them seething day after day, tormenting them round their wayside hive. Idiot boys, they make a menace for every man in sight. Any innocent traveler passing them on that road and serve them accidentally up in arms in a flash, all in a swarm, compounding, each one ranging down to fight for home and children. Such frenzy seized their hearts. Myrmidons pouring out of their ships, careless, ceaseless shouts rising, and over them all Patroclus' war cry, rousing comrades. So now Patroclus is going to scream at his Myrmidons. Myrmidons, brothers in arms of Peleus' son Achilles, fight like men, my friends. Call up your battle fury. Now we must win high honor for Peleus' royal son, far the greatest fighter among the Argive fleet, and we who fight beside him the bravest troops. So even mighty Atreides can see how mad he was to disgrace Achilles, the best of the Achaeans. So in other words, let's teach Agamemnon a lesson by showing how much glory we can get for Achilles. Then we have lots and lots of killing that goes on. And just briefly, at line 345, we're told that Patroclus whipped the terror in all of their hearts, the Trojans, when he killed the chief who topped them all in battle. He rode them off the ships. He quenched the leaping fire, we're told.